Tonight is Sovereignty Unleashed, Claiming Your Independence. That's the theme for this week, being July 4th week here in the US, and claiming your independence in body, mind, and spirit. So I'm glad you guys are here and joining me. And I want to define what a sovereign being is and why this, theme is relevant to Independence Day. To me, in my perspective, the definition of being a sovereign being is that we are living our lives. If you're a sovereign being, that means I have reign over. So in the word sovereign is the word reign, R-E-I-G-A-G-N, R-E-I-G-N, and meaning I have reign over my mind, my body, and my spirit. And to me, that's true freedom. Because, and we'll go through this with each aspect, when we don't have freedom with our time, with our body, how we spend our time, if we don't have the freedom of health, etc., and emotional freedom, we really are living as slaves. And so I wanted to go into each aspect and discuss what that would look like to be a sovereign being in all those areas of your life. And, as I think about it, I can pretty much guarantee you that if you are unhappy, it is probably because you don't feel yourself to be, or you're not conducting yourself as a sovereign being in one of these areas. Now, as I go along, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat and I will check that from time to time. For those of you who are showing up live, definitely drop questions in if you have them. Okay, so let me close out the chat there, see who's there. Okay, so like I said, I think that when sovereignty is crucial for personal growth and fulfillment. And I think most of us have had to fight for that sovereignty in the areas that we have it. Just like the US had to fight for its independence from foreign rule to personal sovereignty. So let's first start with body and physical health. You've heard people say, when you don't have your health, you are poor, if you're in poor health. And most of us know, if you've been through any kind of health issue, from a disease to fatigue to pain to a broken bone, whatever it is, when we don't have freedom with our body to do what we want when we want, we can definitely feel like we're trapped. And really probably pretty much everything else is not going to even be close to being as good. So when we have sovereignty over our bodies, and we could even tie this back to the big thing that happened a couple years ago, being a sovereign being to me means my body, my choice. I can make informed health choices for myself. That's a way for me to be sovereign, is to make informed health choices. Another way is that I get to make my own health choices versus someone imposing them on me because of where I work or where I shop or where I choose to live. So I think that's a huge piece in sovereignty. Self-care and fitness. A lot of you on this live podcast are part of the group with Jay Campbell, and you all know that the more you feel fit, the more you are at your desired weight. You feel that freedom. So choosing a healthy diet, regular exercise, avoiding substances that harm the body is, to me, a form of sovereignty. If you have an addiction, for example, to me, the definition of an addiction is I need that, for example, alcohol to feel normal. I need that weed pen every night before I go to bed to sleep. If we're dependent on anything, a substance outside of ourselves, I would argue that you're not in your sovereignty in relation to health. and you're not really in your sovereignty in how you're coping with life. So to become more sovereign would mean, yes, I might have alcohol, I might hit the weed pen, I might do this or that, but I don't need it to feel normal. I don't need it to function. I don't need it to be more gregarious, come out of my shell, whatever it is. If you're dependent on something, some type of substance, to me, that's the opposite of sovereignty. So when you can move through life and be taking care of your body, this is your temple, then that is you being more in your sovereignty. If you guys think of other ways that, that those ideas stimulate some other way, definitely drop them in the chat. I'd love to see it. Then the second point I wrote down was time freedom, the importance of having control over one's time. And I know that many people, when they choose to go out on their own, start their own business, be a contractor, be a coach, etc., where you have more freedom over how you spend your time. It doesn't necessarily mean you have more time. It could mean that you're just the one in charge of deciding how you work, when you work, and how long you work. And that definitely, for most people, provides a stronger feeling of sovereignty. And most of us who are entrepreneurs would agree that you end up working longer, maybe harder, but typically that's okay because you're doing that because you see there's a payoff to it. And sometimes when we're working for someone else and we're catering to their ideas and their ways of doing things, we can definitely feel less free with our time. And maybe like most of us have felt, if you've worked in a corporation or for someone else, like there's a lot of things that you do that you feel are a waste of your time. And that's a really tough thing on people psychologically. So if you're going to be more sovereign with your time, part of that would be to manage your time more effectively. Take a look at your day, see where you have the time sucks. So for most people, it's going to be social media or Netflix, could be talking on the phone, sitting at the bar with your, the neighborhood bar with your friends. But to be more sovereign means, I believe, that you're more intentional with how you spend your time. And for me with work, there's always things I could be doing because I work for myself. And so for me to be more sovereign with my time, I get up in the morning and I make a list of the things I absolutely have to do. Let's say there's a bill that's got to be paid or some phone calls I need to make to get back to clients in a timely manner or something like that. And then beyond that, it's what tasks are the biggest bang for my time investment. So what are the things related to my work that need to be done that will move the needle forward for me, my business, income, etc., to the greatest extent, and then get to work on those things. Because I'm notorious, and I can give you guys this as an example. I could sit and tweak my website all day. I do my own websites, both for Charleston Hypnosis Center and American Hypnosis and Coaching Academy on Squarespace. I love it. Highly recommend it if you need a website. And but that can really get me away from feeling sovereign with my time, because I get to the end of the night and I'm like, okay, my website looks a little prettier and the verbiage is a little tweaked, but that hasn't gotten me any more clients today. That's not me helping people today, etc., directly. So sovereignty with your time. Here's a big one: emotional freedom. So sovereignty with your emotions. Self-regulation, to me, is one of the biggest things you can do related to emotions and emotional sovereignty. So this means that if I am in control, I reign over my emotions, that means that I am in a place of choice of how I respond to people, to situations, versus feeling like or behaving in a pattern where I'm constantly getting triggered. If you are constantly getting triggered by people and situations, knee-jerk reactions to being anxious, angry, frustrated, you are not sovereign in your emotions. You are allowing something external to you, a person, a place, or a situation, to rule over your emotions. So I think when we talk about it this way, it probably brings in this whole idea of sovereignty. And this is actually was really the first point that came to me in my 4 o'clock download for you guys. So when we talk about emotional freedom, things are going to happen to us all the time, right? Things are going to happen that don't go as we want. Things are going to happen that we wish we had done differently. We are going to, quote unquote, fail, miss the mark. But you're always in a place of having the opportunity to be sovereign over how you feel, how you respond, the story that you tell yourself. You can go back. I've done a lot about emotions in my series lately, and the story that you tell yourself about what's happening has a huge influence on your feeling of sovereignty, and for example, if maybe you're upset with someone that doesn't really care about your feelings, doesn't care that you're upset, then you're giving away your power to that person. So if you read the Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, he says, don't take it personally. That would be a mindset to allow you to be more sovereign in your emotions. Don't take it personally. Don't allow other people's behaviors to dictate your reactions, your attitudes. So as a sovereign being, having emotional sovereignty, that means that I'm always aware, consciously aware. It doesn't always happen, but I'm consciously aware of being in a place of choice of how I respond to a person or a situation, especially when the situation isn't going in the way in which my left brain thinks it should, or my heart thinks it should, or my heart wants it to go. So I think that's a really, really big one. So when you're in a place of emotional sovereignty, you're responding versus knee-jerk reacting. I see myself, I see the situation, and before I act, before I respond, I ask myself, what's the story? Is that story true? How's that story working for me? And then if I have to talk with someone, and I'm upset or frustrated, it's, what's you share with someone, this is my story. Okay. One way to be more in sovereignty, practicing gratitude. Practicing gratitude is a great way to be more sovereign over your emotions, because when you're in a place of practicing gratitude, then you're not focusing on lack or what you're not getting. Another way to be emotionally sovereign is to maintain and practice healthy boundaries with people, drawing boundaries with people. So knowing what your values are, knowing what's acceptable to you in relationships, and knowing that you are not responsible for other people's emotions either. You may meet people and come across people in life who want to blame you for their upset, their anger, their powerlessness, their victim mentality, etc. And so another way, huge way, that you maintain your emotional and even mental sovereignty is to know that what's going on over there with that person is not your fault or your responsibility per se. What you do want to do is know, as a sovereign being, what are my values? So if I value honesty, I value integrity, I value timelessness or timeliness, I value reciprocity in relationships, feeling like I give and that person gives, and there's that reciprocity. Then beyond that, if something you're doing or not doing, if you're living within the framework of your values and that other person is unhappy with you, then they may need to work on their emotional sovereignty. If you've done something that you feel upset about, ashamed, and you're in a place of having made amends, wanting forgiveness, and let's just say this person drags it on, and keeps punishing you and withholding affection or withholding forgiveness, etc., and you've really tried to do the right things to make amends, and you're now living within your value system, then some people will try to control a situation, even withholding intimacy, love, etc., by, calling you a victimizer long after this thing has, should have been resolved. So maintaining that emotional boundaries with your time, not over giving at your own expense. Give when you can and give when it feels good. But if you're over giving with your time, your energy, and your emotions at your own expense, then again, I don't look at that as you being a sovereign being. And in order to get out of that, you have to be willing to draw those boundaries, healthy boundaries, so that you are not over giving, let's say with a job, and it's costing you time with your family, time with your spouse, time to work out at the gym, etc. Then that again would go back to you're giving your sovereignty to someone else. Their needs are more important than what you need for healthy balance. Some water here. Okay, so next, mental sovereignty. What is mental sovereignty? To me, the definition of mental sovereignty is the ability to think independently and critically, meaning to be able to assess a situation, not just take someone else's word for things. It means whether it's a partner, a parent, a job environment, your town, your state, your country, etc. When you're mentally sovereign, it means you're not just taking on other people's beliefs blindly. You're not going with this, just herd mentality. And especially if someone's trying to project or reign over your thoughts, reign over your beliefs. And, you could see this with political parties going at it with each other, and, people are always trying to project that their way of seeing the world and the way that the world should work and how we should work with each other is their paradigm versus your paradigm. So to have mental sovereignty may not mean you can always act on what you believe and know, but it is to make your own choices when it comes to important things. I know when I was growing up and there was a presidential election a couple of times, I remember asking my father who he was voting for. And he would say, I'm not going to tell you. I'm a little kid. I'm like, why? Because I'd go to school and I'd hear little kids say, I'm voting for this person or that, that person. And, why? Well, my dad said this and my dad said that. I don't remember my mom really talking about things, but my dad always said, I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for. If you're interested, I'll help you watch TV or read the newspaper and we'll talk about it. And then you can make your own decision based on that. And I thought that was really cool. So, importance of thinking for yourself in an age of information overload, in an age of people trying to constantly tell you what is right and what's true when you might disagree with that. It's a sticky one. You have to navigate it. I don't believe that we always have to shove our beliefs down other people's throat. You don't have to make anyone come to your position or your perspective in order for it to be your truth. Mental sovereignty is I know what I know and I trust what I know and I know what my values are and I know how I sit on this particular topic. But for me, I go to the place of, but I don't need, to convince anyone else of it, especially if it's going to cause a lot of chaos, fighting, arguing, etc. But at the same time, if someone asks me, or if it's a calm conversation, yes, I'm willing to talk about those things. So another aspect of mental sovereignty that ties into this is this idea of how groups attempt to control our thoughts and behaviors to gain power. So whether it's a corporation, it could be a nonprofit, it could be some type of political group. These groups have their own set of beliefs, perspectives on what's right and what's true, and they thrive off the energy of bringing more and more people into their way of thinking. And the problem with that is that collective energy of a certain type of thought, again, may or may not align with what you believe. And it can be very energy draining if you have to follow along with a certain belief system or paradigm just to fit in, just to be accepted, just to get a paycheck. And so sometimes our mental sovereignty is something that's deeply personal. We have to go against our own true desires and beliefs, but that true sovereignty is when we can recognize and I think resist these groups that would question critical thinking, that question the individual having the right to have their own opinion or stay true to yourself, and having your own awareness, having your own critical thinking, having your own awareness of if something's right for you, that your head and heart feel aligned. To me, that's part of emotional and mental sovereignty connected. And usually if something feels off or we're not happy with the decision, it's because it wasn't head and heart both being in alignment with that idea or that decision. So that's a huge piece of sovereignty, is making decisions whenever you can that feel aligned with your head and it feels good in your heart to make that choice or make that decision. We don't always have that freedom, but those are ideal for conducting your life for the most part and feeling in your sovereignty. So I've mentioned before that when my son was little, he was very defiant, oppositional, and it was very draining as a mother to have to deal with a kid that was constantly, arguing with teachers, questioning why he had to do certain things. Life would have been life's always easier if you have those kids that just go along with whatever you want them to do. But with that said, I now see that my son had this desire to be sovereign at a very young age, meaning to be independent, etc. And that if you have a child who is oppositional, who is displaying oppositional behaviors, it can, if you look at it the right way, it can lead to healthy independence. Those kids can be the ones who don't jump off the cliff just because everyone else does, metaphorically. They can be the ones that buck some of the social norms that are destructive among teenagers. So sometimes if you have someone who's questioning authority, you've got to remember that this child is a sovereign being. And you want to honor and recognize that with your children and point out more instead of, in my mind, having raised a child who was very oppositional and going against the grain, questioning authority, talking back a lot, aggressive at times, going against societal norms. You shift away from this place of punishing and more of educating that child on consequences to their actions, and also elucidating to those children, because typically elucidating that their behaviors aren't productive. And what I mean by that is, when my son was little, oftentimes he would kick the dinner table when I didn't serve food that he liked. And at first I would get angry and resentful and be, mad because I made this home cooked meal and he's not being appreciative. And then I realized this little, 6-year-old is trying to solve a problem. He's trying to be sovereign in his food choices. And, some parents will make a different meal for every child. I didn't believe in that, nor did I have the time for it. So I'd make one meal for everyone in our household. And if he didn't like it, then it was kind of like, well, and he would sometimes get very angry. He wanted something else. And so I distinctly remember saying, it's okay that you don't want to eat what I eat. So that's me honoring his sovereignty, his mindset, his choice, his desire to eat something else. I can acknowledge his sovereign thoughts, beliefs, desires, but I said, it's not okay for you to kick the table. It's okay that you're upset that, your sister won't share her toys, but it's not okay for you to hit. So if you speed, you may get a speeding ticket. If you steal, you might go to jail. So in this way, you're honoring your child's sovereignty in making their own choices, making their own mistakes. So sovereignty doesn't always mean that we're always right and we make the right decisions, but we have the freedom to make our own mistakes and learn from them. And I always said he was that type of kid, and you may have one of the type of those kids too, where you can't tell them anything. You can't warn them away from consequences. They have to test the boundaries. They have to figure out their own boundaries. And if something a negative consequence comes up from their behaviors, so be it, right? So in a sense, as a mother, I'm willing to acknowledge my son or children as being sovereign and having the right to be upset. Now, ultimately, as my son got older, I would try to teach him that he is sovereign in his emotions. And as such, he has a choice in how he responds to his sister not sharing her toys. He can be mad about it. He can be upset. He can be understanding. He can have whatever story he wants to tell himself about the situation, but encouraging him to choose stories that give him peace and positivity and zest for life and energy for life. So that's how you would address helping your kids to be sovereign, and understanding that just because they're your children doesn't mean that they don't have their own desires, their own needs, their own viewpoints on life, their own everything, right? And so that could even be in their sexual proclivities. I've known parents that were very upset if the child that they have turned out to be gay or something like that. But that goes along with it too. Sexual choice sovereignty. And I don't believe that we have the right to tell someone that as an adult. I won't even get into the childhood stuff. That's not what I'm talking about here. Um, so we are supposed to be guiding our kids and having them consider situations in order so that they can become autonomous adults. Okay. So, of course, sovereignty then, segueing into adult to adult, the importance of autonomy and making our own decisions about our body, time, making our own decisions about our emotional reactions, strategies for resisting external pressures, to maintain our personal sovereignty with our emotions. So now I'll go to financial independence and freedom. So financial sovereignty, which to me would mean freedom from debt and financial control by others. So in this life that we live, we're all going to have debt. I highly recommend, if you haven't read it, and that's a challenge for you, to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. He talks about the difference between good debt, bad debt, which basically means, from my perspective, understanding his ideas is that when you put money into a depreciating asset like an RV or a car or a cell phone, perhaps, that's costing you a couple $1,000s, something like that. If you're running up debt and allowing more and more of financial control by others, that is the opposite of sovereignty. That's the opposite of financial sovereignty. So there's a guy on YouTube that, I don't know that he's put out any videos lately, but I followed him several years ago, and his YouTube channel is called Savings Minus Debt. And he introduced this concept of being a debt slave. And basically, he says that there's a lot of language in our society that's intended to trick you essentially into thinking that you're homeowners, car owners. So if I go out and I buy a house and I take a mortgage on it, they call you a homeowner versus a renter. But really, you're not a homeowner, you're a loan owner. If you have a loan on a car, if you have a loan on a house, you are a loan owner. So it's the way of our society, but I don't believe it's right. And I don't believe it's you being fully in your sovereignty, because that means that the bank can come take your car, come take your house. And so a huge, huge piece of mind, I think a huge piece of a healthy relationship, is that you try to have a financial plan, you try to avoid unnecessary debt. You try to not be a debt slave, which means your bills are higher than your income, and that you have these huge loans, even student loans, that will take forever to pay off. So one of the things I've been working with both my kids on, who are both in college, is working our butts off together in tandem to make sure that they don't have debt when they graduate. Now, I know not everyone can do this for their kids, and not every one of us can do this, but the closer you are to avoiding that type of soul crushing debt, the more you are in your financial sovereignty. I know there's a lot of people that think a budget is a 4-letter word, or just live for the day, etc. But you do want to strike a balance, and why that balance is important too is because there's a mental burden that hangs on so many of us, heaviness in the background of your mind when you know that you're have all these bills, you know you're paying 22% on your credit cards. So again, trying to pay off your debt, unnecessary debt, building up income streams. I know for myself, when we went through the pandemic and my office here in town, the brick and mortar closed down for 3 months. That was when I decided I needed to do more virtual work, that I wanted to teach online, etc. So thinking about how you can move towards more and more towards financial independence and freedom and be sovereign over your finances and not be so much in debt where you can't sleep at night, where it's just this malaise in the back of your mind that's always there. Thinking about that, if it's putting that emotional burden on you, then again, you're not in your sovereignty. So having that, what I call fiscal responsibility. And when any of you watching who are single, as I'm single, I really consider that. I don't need to see somebody's bank account or anything, but you can tell by the way people live their lives, typically, whether they're trying to adhere to fiscal responsibility, maintaining financial sovereignty by not racking up the credit cards, financing houses, boats, and cars, basically living within your means, planning for the future, tracking your expenses. You don't have to be obsessed with it. A big thing to do, and you've heard this before, but creating an emergency fund, creating 90 days worth of peace of mind in your, bank account, whether it's a separate savings account, and having what I call a warrior line. So a warrior line is, let's say I've got $3,000 that I put into my checking account, or actually I do this with my business account, because I have a certain number in my head that I work to never go below that number, so that if we did have something come up where I couldn't work, then I know I've got that emergency money in the background. For a house, if you own your own home, you have a loan on your home and you're paying the mortgage, you would want to have that money for potential, your air conditioning goes out, your heat goes out, you need a new water heater all of a sudden, or you get these balloon payments that are due. So what I do is I save every month for my homeowner's insurance that's due once a year, flood insurance here that's due once a year, taxes that are due, so that I don't have to go scrambling or throw stuff on my credit card when taxes and insurance are due. And so to me, that's fiscal responsibility, leading to me feeling more in control. Financial sovereignty is this feeling for me like I'm in control of how I spend, when I spend, and I'm not, and the peace of mind I get of not having this. I mean, no one likes to get the tax bill in the mail, but the tax bill comes and I'm not sitting there saying, oh my God, how am I going to pay this? Do I have enough on my credit cards to cover this? And I have a neighbor friend who does live like that. And I just see the emotional torture she goes through every year because she doesn't do the quarterly taxes. And then she owes this big balloon payment to the IRS. And so part of, again, about this financial sovereignty is the peace of mind that it gives you to live within your means, to be planning for those type of one-off payments, to be planning for that emergency fund, save up for vacation. There's always this letdown. You go on a great vacation, you come home, and then a month later, you got $5,000 on your credit card. You're like, gut punch, right? So saving up for those types of things to me is in alignment with financial sovereignty. All right, let me check. I know I saw a question in here. Let me check on that, and then I'll go over my last point for that. Okay, yeah. Okay, yes, you'll have to see the replay for this. She missed the first 15 minutes. Yep. Okay, so last one. Happiness. Generating happiness from within is probably, to me, your greatest area of life in general where you can live sovereign. So if I derive my happiness from someone else in my life showing up the way I want them to show up, when, how, what they do, what they say, in the frequency they say it and do it, then I am a slave to their behaviors. I'm a slave to their attention. I'm reactive to the lack of attention. I'm reactive to things like that. I remember I had a close friend in my 20s, and he used to talk about, he married my best friend, but he went to my high school, and he said that his mom would get so upset when he forget to send a Mother's Day card, or if he would forget to send a birthday card. A phone call wasn't enough. And so, bless her heart, his mother was living with these expectations of how a son should behave, how he should show up, the things that he should do. So if you're having expectations from someone else, whether it's your child, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your parents, coworkers, etc., if you have expectations in your mind of how people should be, and in a day-to-day basis, people are not going to always show up the way you want them to or expect them to. So if you want to be more sovereign in your sense of in that way, which leads to happiness, then you have to stop putting so much importance on what other people do and don't do. Again, going back to the 4 agreements with the book by Ruiz, it's, don't take it personally, right? But this is the way I look at it. In order to be happier, which would mean you are more sovereign in your inner mood, in your happiness, right? To be more sovereign, in order to be more happy, I've been teaching this idea for years. You want to have more preferences and fewer needs. So I'll explain what I mean by that, but you want to have more preferences and fewer needs. And so, for example, sure, would I like my kids to send me a card on Mother's Day? Absolutely. I mean, my daughter lives with me, so she really wouldn't. My son's a couple hours away. Great. Yeah, I would love for him to send me a card, but I don't need him to send me a Mother's Day card to feel happy, to feel like I'm a worthy mother, that I'm getting his acknowledgement, I'm getting his validation. And so that's in the preference category, not in the need category. If I have a partner and I like to be told every day, I love you, have a good day, or good morning, or I'm dating someone, they text me in the morning, good morning, with the sun emoji or the smiley emoji, right? And let's say they skip a day. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm unhappy. I didn't hear from so-and-so today, right? Then I'm putting my happiness into what they don't do. They're not doing something that they normally do, and then that makes me unhappy. Well, then I'm giving away my happiness. I'm giving away my sovereignty. I'm letting their behaviors rule how I feel inside about myself, because I could take it as I could make a narrative about, oh, they don't care for me as much as I care for them or whatever. So do you prefer things? Absolutely. If you go to your favorite restaurant, you have this one thing that you always get, and love it. And that's what people typically do, right? You get the same thing. You always get the chicken, Alfredo, gluten-free noodles or something, although I don't really eat that stuff. But but that one thing that you really like to get from there and they don't have it and you're upset, you stomp out of the restaurant. No, it probably wouldn't happen. But it's a preference that I have that meal. If they don't have it, okay, I'll get something else. So let's say I have a beach day planned for 4th of July and it's raining. Darn, I don't have to be bummed out, depressed, angry, cursing at the sky, right? I prefer for it to be sunny on 4th of July, but if it's not, okay. So when you wake up every day, if you're going to really, really be a happier person, You have to find that mechanism from happiness within. The mechanism that generates your happiness needs to come internally rather than relying on external people or circumstances to show up according to your expectations. So expectations will really kill it for you. So when you wake up in the morning, the fewer things you have in the expectation list, in the need column, and more in the preference overall, I'm telling you guys, this is the way to that sovereignty with your happiness. So yeah, I need air. I need enough money to pay my bills every month. Do I need it? No, I prefer it. That one can go into the prefer category. I need food to live. Yes. And really for me, there's very few things in the need category. I'd like to say I need to feel safe where I live. And I would say for me, that would fall more into a need category. If I'm living someplace and I don't feel safe at night, coming to and from my car, I'm going to try to live somewhere else if possible. So I hope that kind of explains that whole idea. But the fewer things you have in the need category, the more and more you have in the preference category, hands down. That's one of the hugest, biggest, simplest ways to cultivate inner happiness is reflect on that, make your column A with the needs in your life versus preferences. There's a saying, it's said to be attributed to Buddha. And the saying is resistance to what is the root of all suffering. So to me, the opposite of being sovereign as relating to happiness would be that I'm suffering. So in any situation, if I'm suffering, meaning I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling resentful, I'm feeling anxious, I'll ask myself, what am I resisting? What am I resisting right now? So when I first moved here from California, I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had one friend here and we had talked a lot about spending a lot of time together. She was actually moving here as well to the same town, even though we both were coming from other parts of the country. And there was just this understanding that we were going to be our besties and, spend all this time together. And then when she moved here, she bought a business with her husband and ended up really, weren't spending much time together. And I remember one time going out with her in the evening, which was very rare. I'd say I've lived here 18 years, and we've gone out in the evening maybe a couple times, just the two of us. And at first I was just really angry and hurt, more hurt. Anger is always a cover up for something. So I was feeling hurt. And so I came home that night and I sat down in the quiet. This was when my kids were little, and I barely got out, by the way, as it was, because when you're a mom with little kids, you don't really go out that much. And I asked myself, okay, what's causing this malaise? What's causing this unhappiness? And I said, I'm resisting. What are you resisting? Resistance to what is the root of all suffering. I'm resisting the situation. I want this person to show up differently. I want her to make me a priority. I want her to make our relationship, our friendship a priority. And I sat with it. I think I probably had a good cry because I really, really had a lot of strong friendship feelings for this person. And the dust cleared, and I said to myself, you can find other soul sisters. And if this person doesn't want that, that's okay. You can find other people who do want to step up and have those types of friendships with you. And I did. And I found a lot of other friends. And the beauty of it is that I was able to accept her for the minimum amount of time that we spent together. So it took the burden off of her and me having these expectations, and I was able to shift our relationship from a need to a preference. Yes, I prefer to see her more, but if I can't, it's okay. So I didn't resist the situation. I didn't resist the friendship as it was. And I was able to move more into this place of sovereign in my feelings about it, sovereign in my happiness, not letting my happiness be siphoned off by negative feelings about this friendship. And I could just accept it for what it was and get those needs met somewhere else. And that was a way to regain my sovereignty in my emotions, my mindset, and my happiness all in one situation. So, final thoughts on the importance of sovereignty in all these aspects of our life. If you need help, first of all, I know I've thrown a lot of things at you. I hope they make sense. If you want help, private coaching, I do 60-minute sessions, 90-minute sessions. You can reach out to me and either set up a 15-minute free phone call with me, or just go ahead and sign up on my website, RebeccaTaylorShaw.com. Can link to my calendar, or charlestonhypnosiscenter.com, and we can work together, and I'd be happy to help you become a more sovereign being. I encourage you to reflect on these different areas of your life and your own levels of sovereignty, and take steps towards greater independence emotionally, mentally, physically, with your heart, with your happiness. And I definitely welcome feedback. If there's other topics you'd like to have me discuss, if you have questions about this, you can post them under the video itself when it's posted. And I hope that this helps. And I'm so happy to get this information out to all of you. And I hope you have a wonderful and fun and sunny July 4th. Take care, everybody. Bye.